That sudden flash of white on the spring forest floor is actually the finish line of a 10-year journey. The white trillium is a spring ephemeral. This means the plant has a tiny, urgent window to push through the soil and soak up the sun before the massive trees above it grow their leaves and plunge the forest floor into deep shade. Ecologists consider these plants a bioindicator. Because of how slowly they grow, finding a massive, unbroken carpet of trilliums proves that the specific patch of dirt you are standing on has not been turned over, paved, or cleared for over a century. A blooming white trillium acts as a living calendar. It provides physical proof of a deep, stable, and undisturbed landscape. Trillium grandiflorum is built on a strict mathematical geometry. The plant features exactly 3 white petals, 3 green sepals underneath, and a whorl of 3 leaves. Those 3 leaves operate as the plant's only solar panels. It does not grow replacements. Once it deploys them for the spring, that is all the energy-gathering equipment it has to sustain itself for the entire year. This minimalist design is highly efficient, but it leaves the plant entirely defenseless. If a hiker steps on the stem or an animal takes a single bite, the trillium loses its entire food supply in a fraction of a second. To reproduce, the trillium relies on myrmecochory, seed dispersal by ants. Each seed comes with a fatty, nutrient-rich appendage called an iliosome. Ants drag these seeds down into their burrows to eat the fat, leaving the actual seed intact inside their underground refuse piles. Safe inside that nutrient-rich compost heap, the seed enters double dormancy. It sits in the dark for 2 full years, enduring 2 freezing winters and 2 warm summers, just to push out a single tiny root and 1 juvenile leaf. From there, it is a waiting game. The plant spends the next 7 to 10 years slowly gathering resources, growing millimeters at a time, before it finally stores enough energy to produce its very first flower. A trillium survives through an agonizingly slow, invisible partnership between soil biology and insects. Removing any piece of that equation brings the growth cycle to a halt. When settlers eliminated the gray wolf from the deciduous forests of eastern North America, they removed the apex predator, keeping the food web in balance. Without wolves, white-tailed deer populations surged. Deer find the largest, mature, flowering trilliums especially appetizing, targeting them in early spring when other food sources are still scarce. This chart shows the cumulative frequency of plant sizes across different trillium populations. Looking at the 2 graphs at the bottom, which represent sites with high deer density, the large, mature plants are almost entirely absent. Because the trillium only has 3 leaves, 1 bite from a deer removes 100% of its foliage, preventing it from flowering for years or killing the root entirely. A missing predator hundreds of miles away sets off a chain reaction that determines whether a tiny wildflower on the forest floor survives the decade. If you grew up in Ontario, Canada, you were likely warned that picking a white trillium is a strict criminal offense, one that might literally bring the Mounties out of the woods to arrest you. But that law does not actually exist. While the flowers are protected inside provincial parks, there is no blanket legislation making it a crime to pick them on private land. The flower's special status dates back to 1937. Following the First World War, botanists searched for an official floral emblem to plant on the overseas graves of Canadian servicemen. They eventually selected the white trillium to represent Ontario. Over time, the provincial government stamped the flower on tax forms, on driver's licenses, and official logos. By adopting a native plant already deeply anchored in the dirt, the settler government created a visual link to naturalize its own political presence on the land. The strict law we all warn each other about is a fabricated cultural shield. Society built a protective myth to guard an organism that takes a decade to grow and a single second to destroy. Long before it was a government logo, the Anishinaabe knew this plant as Inanuan Dibikagan, or birthroot. They understood its properties and carefully utilized the root as a traditional medicine for childbirth and reproductive health. That traditional ecological knowledge respects the slow-moving cycles of the forest. It stands in sharp contrast to the modern impulse to immediately pick, consume, or take a wildflower just because it looks pretty for a moment. The white trillium demands a specific kind of respect. The most enduring pieces of the forest are often the most fragile. surviving only when we have the discipline